A lot of it's not. A lot of it's easy. You just show up and you speak up, and like you feel really scared inside, but you try to just push through that.
Hello everyone, I'm Nils Mindnich, and this is the Backcountry Podcast, a show aimed towards providing insight on the outdoor industry by interviewing people who operate within it. Today, we're going to be talking with Caroline Gleich, athlete, activist, and all-around mountain badass. Caroline, what up?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we kind of got like the end of the snowboard season wrapping up, so I'm tailoring off random projects and efforts to finish out the year strong, and looking forward to spring and summer.
Yes, I'm looking forward to some sunshine.
I know.
That was something I really missed this winter.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to admit that because it was great to have, but actually I think that 900 inches is like too many inches.
Yeah, I kind of agree. 750 to 800 would have been great.
That would have been perfect.
If they could have just kind of pumped the brakes there, that would have been awesome.
It was a little stressful.
Yeah, I know. I mean, how was that too? Because at least on my end, I had a bunch of resort days, and I feel like, especially for the style of stuff that you're into, did you like not really get to tick off like the objectives that you like because there's just like small windows to actually do bigger things?
Yeah, I felt like all winter it was just kind of touchy with Abbey Danger, and there was a week like early on where things were pretty good to go, but it was super cold that week. So yeah, it was a little frustrating and a little challenging, and then especially with all the canyon closures. It was a challenge for sure. It was stressful. Like it was stressful on wildlife, I think, with the elk and deer populations.
Yeah.
And I feel like the wildlife, like I was definitely struggling a little bit.
You got some seasonal fatigue.
Yeah. It's very difficult trail breaking.
Yes. Yeah, I bet.
But I did get to ski a lot because so many little nooks and crannies in the backyard were filled in. So just like a random little hill that you would normally never be able to ski tour up, they were all good to go. So doing a lot of lower elevation things and just random things in Park City, like skiing Park City Hill. And I spent a lot of time in the trees though, like below tree line, which is weird. Like I miss the alpine for sure.
Understandable. Yeah, I was kind of in a similar boat. There was just so many low angle POW days.
Yes.
Fun facts, we've had to reschedule this interview because of a pretty cool reason. And why was that?
I had a last minute opportunity to go to Greenland with EOS Expeditions and to spend a week on a boat and skiing from a boat on the west coast of Greenland.
What was that like?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was Bodie Miller, Chris Davenport, Doug Stoop that were there. And so getting to ski with some of those guys that I've looked up to for a long time, that was amazing. And then Greenland is somewhere I've always wanted to go since I first like flew over it on the way home from Europe. Like I'm always that person that's looking out the window seat, like scouting from the air, taking photos. And I've been obsessed with Greenland because you can see the sea ice breaking up and you look down and it's like all these speckled blobs of ice and snow everywhere. And I love the cold and I love the snow. And so Greenland has called to me for a long time and I was so stoked to make it happen.
I think that's cool. Did you guys were you kind of spearheading the trip? Was it like a specific objective? Like, did you have one peak or like one main couloir? Was it just a region you kind of wanted to go to? What was like the focal point?
I mean, Greenland is a hard country to see because it's got pretty limited infrastructure in terms of getting around. And so being able to travel by boat was really cool. But I was joining a preset expedition that already had 10 guests on it. So we were just sort of tagging along. But it was a great way to see a bunch of parts of Greenland and to get my feet wet there. And I have other objectives I hope to go back and do that I would be more in a leadership position for.
Yeah, totally.
But sometimes you just got to go. Like, I had a trip pitched to Greenland in 2015, and it's been on my radar ever since.
No way.
And so you have to be really relentless in the pursuit of your dreams sometimes because trips to those places, they don't often happen organically.
Yeah.
Like you have to push it and you have to keep reaching out to people and keep finding leads and ways to make it happen.
Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I've intermittently been putting effort towards spending time in Alaska and just kind of like traditional big mountain riding. And with that, it's kind of a similar story, right? That there's always like, as soon as you kind of exit the bubble that you normally operate in and go to these like more remote or obscure places, the the like logistics, the relationships, the like all aspects of it, from like people to weather to locations, really like starts compounding, and it makes it hard.
It makes it hard. It's super complicated and it's super stressful. Like traveling right now, I think the travel industry has still not caught up with like the pandemic shortages and the pilot layoffs and stuff. And so every flight I've been on in the last like year or two, there's been so many delays and problems.
Yeah.
But even with all the headache, it's always worth it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're like, why am I doing this? Like I'm missing so many days of skiing and life. And I'm just sitting at an airport, and it's almost always worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, like, so you've got back from Greenland a day ago.
I think like 3 days ago.
3 days
I can't
ago.
remember. What is time?
And what is time? Time's a flat circle, according to Matthew McConaughey.
Okay. Yeah.
And how long are you home for?
I'm home for like a week or two, and then I'm heading to LA for a Strava camp, which
Okay.
I'm really excited about.
Okay.
And then I'm home for a week or two, and then I go to Minneapolis for a speaking engagement.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I'm not quite sure. In June.
Okay.
June, and then July, I'm going to Japan with my partner, and he's going to do a big open water swim.
Whoa.
Hopefully we'll get to run up Mount Fuji, and then have a family trip to Mexico. But
Cool.
yeah, it's like a lot of work planning trips. So
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out ways to make it like easier.
Yeah, I know. And I was going to say, like, that's kind of what I wanted to get at too. Like, it seems like, and we'll sort of get into your resume and your body of work, if you will, but a lot of things that you've accomplished just require so much legwork, a lot of like trips and logistics and stuff like that. And it, you know, even just like your schedule right now is like twice as much stuff as what I would have going on in the quiet time of year.
Yeah.
You ever experience burnout, or are you just kind of in this like compounding like opportunity cycle? You know, what's going on there? Do you have to say no to a lot of things, or are you just always trying to like find the next thing?
I think that I need to work on getting better at saying no to things because I don't think it's saying no. It's like I don't have space at this time, but I'd love to do it in the future. Because it's like I do like to say yes. Like I am a people pleaser, and I have gone through periods of like pretty intense burnout before where I just literally sometimes would spend a whole day in bed or watching TV. Like I actually do that.
You would sit down for a day?
I did that yesterday, actually. Like I went for a short ski tour with my dog in the morning. We just did a couple.
And this is your rest day?
It wasn't even meant. I don't know what it was. It's like the re-entry from a trip is hard, you know?
Yep, re-entry. Yeah,
the
re-entry is crazy.
Is hard. It's like mentally you have everything you've just thrown aside and you have to pick up the pieces, and it feels really messy and uncomfortable. But I think just having self-compassion. And so yesterday I did just the short ski tour with the dog. And I got home and I was so tired. I just laid in bed and watched TV in like the middle of the afternoon.
That's great.
And I had tons of stuff I needed to do, but I was like, I just need to rest and lay down. And so I do that a lot. I try to listen to my body. And I try to really be sure I can show up 100% for the things I say yes to.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, some days, like, I'm good at being really lazy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, you got to own it. You ever have, like, something... So this is one of the first winters that I was kind of, like, working and filming a lot at home just because the season was so good. And I kind of ran into, like, a problem of trying to, like, separate my day-to-day, like, house life, you know, like partner obligations from like being on a trip, but I'm still home. Do you experience that at all? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's like absolutely no work-life balance for me. I like to make everything into work.
Okay.
And like, even if we're on vacation, I'm like, oh, let's make a travel vlog about it. And like, I'm filming the whole time. And then soon I have like a terabyte of data that I need to transfer and organize on a memory card and then edit or get to an editor. Like I outsourced a lot of video editing because it's just so time consuming, the content management.
It's a lot. It's
really hard. And so I would say, I think that's fine to have like no work-life balance. As long as you don't get, I think it's fine when, like I love my job.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't, like a lot of my days at work don't really feel like work. Because I love it. I love filming. I love skiing for fun. I love training. Like yeah, I guess sometimes I get really burnt out and I need to rest or go to Greenland for a week and just sort of check out for a couple days. But at the end of the day, ever since I was a little girl, this is exactly what I've wanted to do with my life. And so I still get really giddy that it's like, this is my job, it's super fun.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you set me up for a meatball question because I was like, I kind of want to get into the earlier phases of like Caroline's ski career. And like, it seemed like a lot of the accomplishments that you've had are kind of, first descent, like technical descents, or really technical ascents, things like that, kind of like mountaineering, peak objective things, or like a lot of like mileage specific things, with your whole running career and whatnot. Has it always been that way? Like since a little kid, were you track and field athlete or something like that? Or like, was there kind of this transitional phase through your youth that led you into the trajectory you're on now?
I grew up in Minnesota and I never ski raced or did sports really.
Whoa.
My parents are like really, they're both professors and doctors at the University of Utah.
What are their practices?
My mom is a dermatologist and my dad is an immunologist. And so they wanted me to become a lawyer.
Naturally.
Yes.
Set the
or
bar
a politician.
Oh, set the bar low.
Yeah.
I see. Correct.
So like they named me Caroline, it means strong and womanly, and Louise is my
Yeah.
middle name and it means famous in battle. So I also have a lot of older siblings and they're like, she's got to be tough, So they always steered me towards like playing musical instruments and learning languages. But in my heart, all I wanted to do is be an athlete. So we would do like a ski trip out west once a year. And I would wear like my brother's hand-me-downs and I didn't have like my own goggles or my own skis until I was sponsored.
No way.
Yeah, I never had like I had like a used hand-me-down pair, but it's not like I ever had, like I never went to the shop and like picked out a new pair of skis.
Yeah.
It was like a ski swap or my brother's hand-me-downs.
Here's something. Do you think that, because oftentimes you'll hear a lot of athletes or professional athletes with the inverse, right? They kind of had the sport shoved down their throat, for lack of a better description.
Yeah.
Do you think having like sort of this barrier to entry, like your family wasn't really pushing you, right, to become a pro skier or anything? Do you think having that, like, you never fully got to experience it helped drive you to like continue to like seek it out?
I think that's an interesting question. The one thing that not ski racing throughout my childhood did is it like my body was in good shape when I started as an adult. Because like I think what happens with a lot of younger athletes, especially now that ski racing and slopestyle and freestyle and big mountain skiing, they're all so competitive. I think younger athletes get hurt and they get those like degenerative, that arthritis going or whatever it is. And so
I know.
I think that it kept my body, I've still had my share of wear and tear on my joints and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I do think like that part of it set me up for success. But on the other hand, I would have loved to ski race as a kid. Like that was my dream. So I don't know. It's a hard question. I don't know. Like, because
it just happened the way it did.
It might have been the same outcome if my parents had pushed me into sports. But they pushed me into academics. And then I think a lot of the nerdy stuff, like I'm actually a big nerd. And I grew up like playing video games and like practicing coding on my computer. I think a lot of that stuff and having a solid background as like a writer and as a, in school, having a degree from the University of Utah, I think that stuff has come in really handy and it's been super helpful to building and to maintaining my career. Yeah. It's not just athletics. Like I'm not the best skier in the world. Like I'd never say I am. I'm always trying to learn and get better. So the first like decade of my career, I worked on a lot of photo and film shoots. And I would literally look at like the frame by frame replay of my skiing as a sort of video analysis. Yeah. To try to learn how to get better. Yeah. And I'm still always trying to get better. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I'm that good of a skier. I don't know. Like
it's never ending. I'll tell you that much because I started riding very early. I was a full-time competitor in first grade. Okay. Right? Yeah. Sponsored athlete when I was 12 and I
That's awesome.
moved out when I was 14, right? So I had that.
You had my childhood that I wanted. I'm so
exactly.
jealous.
And let me tell you, I started my history with physical therapy started around when I was like 15, 16. And now it's just this like, it's nice because I'm in my later 20s now and I've kind of feel like I've come full circle, but there's probably this like 5-year, almost 10-year adjustment that I had to make with my body of like off-season maintenance and like recovery and kind of understanding like how to actually be an athlete versus like what you get tossed into as a 12-year-old kid. So there's totally, I understand there's that learning curve, and it's not easy, right? To like try to continue to get better, but then like your body is like, just has so much impact mileage on it, right?
Yeah, and I think just the broader like snow sports culture really pushes people sometimes too far.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
That's the culture.
It's
too.
the culture. I know. I mean? Yeah, it is our like Western American like capitalist culture. It's like you have to ski bell to bell and like send it so hard and never show any pain. And like I'm like the person who will go in a little bit early and like skip out on an extra run if I'm feeling tired. And I think that stuff has been good for longevity because it's that extra run. It's not listening to your internal, your gut feeling. That's when you get into trouble.
That is like, I've talked to a couple like professional climbers about this, and I experienced it myself of kind of like a true indicator of like how you can become kind of that like best athlete you can be is like knowing when to rest. Because it's so easy to be like, oh, I just gotta like one more burn, one more like run, one more like go at the trick. I mean, I experienced this last week. I was, had a childhood dream kind of come to fruition, and we were hitting Chad's Gap, that like jump out in Grizzly Gulch. And I like battled this trick and just had to call it. I was like close, but I was like, I'm so tired, and I'm just like, the indicators are kind of pointing, and like a jump like that, or maybe like any pursuit, if you push it too far, the consequences will set you back further than if you just like decide to stop, and that's hard. Or you might die. Yeah, or you could totally die. You could totally die. Like that's the reality. And like, especially the stuff you're doing, like alpinism. I feel like alpinism has such a fine line of that. What's your insight on that? Because I like rock climbing and I snowboard. So from the outside, a lot of people are like, you're going to be an alpinist, right? And I'm just like, nah, I don't know. Like people just like die. Like, what's your take on that? Because I would say you are an accomplished alpinist. Well, I wanted to just say one thing, and that is Chad's Gap is so gnarly. That is so scary. And it's like, it's the same kind of thing, though. It's like if you miscalculate something and you come up short, like you could suffer a really life-changing injury. Totally, yeah. And so I think it's very similar in the Alpine. And it's one of those things now. I'm 37. So I've been doing this for almost 2 decades. Wow, yeah. I mean, like, even starting in my career, like I had friends die in avalanches. I've had 37 friends die, including like some people really close to me. So I'm like pretty traumatized by it. And I'm very cautious about when I take risks now. Yeah. Like I don't need to do it all the time. Like I've skied the shooting gallery and like I've skied a lot of the shooting gallery twice or 5 times. Like I've skied a ton of the lines many times. Yeah. And so I don't feel like I need to prove myself anymore. And I try to save it, but it's really hard to battle the pressure from social media, from sponsors, from like the culture, being a middle-aged athlete, like to stay relevant. The comments that people say sometimes, like it's hard to not let that get under your skin. Or it's like, I've thought about starting a family and it's like, oh, I gotta get it in before. And that's a kind of decision making that leads to poor choices, I think. And so just trying to be aware of them and then trying to not let that make me make bad decisions. But it's a moving target and it's really tough. And losing Hillary Nelson, like she was a big inspiration for me last September. Like that was really hard. That was tough. It was a tough winter for me actually because of that. Like there's a lot of grief and PTSD and stuff like that. And so it's hard sometimes. I really struggle with the mental health
of having lost so many of my heroes. Yeah, it's tough. So I don't know. I don't have a great answer. But what I would say is that there's so much joy to be had in skiing low angle powder. And it's like, there is. And just going for like I spend so much time with my dog now.
Yeah.
And she's so helpful for my mental health. Like, it's kind of embarrassing how like some days I just I just don't want to push it. So I think that there's nothing wrong with just getting outside. And I know I've been like that gnarly person who's goal obsessed before.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to also nurture a side of me that's really happy to go for a chill walk with my dog or to ski low angle pow, because like that stuff is great too.
Yeah.
And there's like at a certain point in your career, it's the story you tell. It's not about the accomplishment. And so what are the stories you're telling, and how are you using sport and your time outside to inspire people and to change the world? And there's so many ways you can do that. It doesn't have to be the gnarly full send all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree.
You have to be careful when you take the big risks because you only have so many matches in your matchbox of life. And you don't want to burn your matches. You don't want to use them all too soon.
Yeah.
You have to be really careful.
No, I mean, you struck a chord with me with that one, because I feel like, and I think there's a lot of folks in our space, and I think just plenty of people in the world too, right? You're less or more risk adverse. You're more likely to take risks earlier on. There's there's actually this, every year I kind of do this like avalanche first aid course, and they call it the risk maturity course. And the whole concept of it is based around decision making and sort of your approach, and the ideas of like, how can you make decisions to ideally have the best days possible?
Yeah.
And then there's also a whole, first responder aspect to it. So like when shit did, whatever, it's like a normal training.
Yeah.
But there's a really interesting graph that they show you in the class, and it's this bell curve of like your risk tolerance over time. And it's kind of this, right, has that like exponential curve at first early on. You get like super risk adverse early on, and then it kind of plateaus out as time goes on. And then as time continues on, your tolerance like starts to drop off. And it's like, especially in mountain culture, you get a lot of firsthand examples to what the risks are, right? And that like inevitably affects your decision making, right?
Yeah. I mean, I lost one of my best friends in, I think it was 2015. My friend Liz Daly was killed in an avalanche, and it took me like 2 years after that before I like was really that stoked to go ski in steeper terrain.
Yeah. And
so it's just like, it takes time, and it's really good to listen to that stuff. And and also there's a lot of joy to be had in sharing the sport with others. And that's something that like I would encourage a lot of people in this space to think about, is like reaching out and cultivating relationships with people who don't look like us, like people of color, and serving as a mentor to support their leadership, because like we have a lot of privilege to be able to play in these spaces, and so we should be doing what we can to invite others in. So that's another way that's like you can make, I don't know, it's just finding the joy and like keeping it fresh, but without always taking more risk, for sure. Yeah, totally. But that whole decision-making curve is really interesting.
Do you think there's a parallel for yourself between having pursued so many gnarly objectives with kind of this current pursuit of like activism and inclusion and stuff like that? Like, was that sort of like where your focal point maybe shifted to kind of adjust your fulfillment? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. But for me, it's always been interwoven in my career. And so, there's been other times that I've had like injuries where I've been able to pour my passion and my energy into my activism more. Yeah. And so it's really, I think it's one of those things that's really complementary. Yeah. And I don't really see it as like one replacing the other, but for me, they've always gone hand in hand. Yeah. I think it's like back to my parents, is that they were always just like, Caroline, being an athlete isn't a job. Like they're like saving people's lives at work, and like, they were always pushing me to try to have an impact greater than just being an athlete. I mean, I think being an athlete is like the coolest thing ever. And I think that athletes do tons of great work, but I'm just trying to make my parents like proud and to see me as a legitimate force in the world. And so So I think like when I was getting ready to graduate from the University of Utah, I was really struggling with like whether I should go on to go to grad school and get my MBA, JD, or whatever combination of letters.
What did you study?
I majored in anthropology. So I have a
What's-
BS in anthropology.
What's anthropology for a layman?
It's like
Not myself.
human evolution across time and space.
Cool.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it goes back like 2 million years.
Yeah.
From how we evolved from
Interesting.
primates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's really, there's so many different facets of it. It's a really fascinating major. I really just enjoyed the courses.
Yeah.
But my senior year, I did a political internship where I interned for the governor of Utah's environmental advisor. And so I got to like work firsthand on a lot of policy stuff, and they offered me a job at the end of the summer internship. And it was then that I decided instead to pursue my career as a skier. But ever since having that background, I've always really tried to weave that together with my skiing and use like stories from the mountains to help inspire legislation and advocacy efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that, because I would say you are a very involved activist. I'm a part of the POW Alliance, and stuff like that. And like I operate a much more surface level role, right? And then it's honestly like intimidating and impressive to see someone like yourself who's like done so much speaking, done so much like on the ground activism work at a political level. Did that feel kind of natural, or was there like these baby steps you took, or were you just sort of like tossed into it?
It's one of those things, just like with snowboarding, that you learn a small trick before you try a front flip, or like you learn to go off the jump before you try to do a 360.
Okay.
And so like in high school, I lettered in speech, and I had a lot of practice speaking, and public speaking and a lot of the advocacy work terrifies me. Like I'm actually a really scared person, and I have like really bad anxiety, and it's really hard. And so I practice a lot and I take a lot of classes.
Yeah.
And so I'm always trying to continue like with skiing and with my activism, my professional development, and like trying to learn different sides of it. And so like just signing up for the local environmental nonprofits, they do lobby training and lobby nights. And so going to those and practicing my skills and learning about the current bills and the current issues in Utah. And then with skiing, like trying to train for different kinds of goals, you have a plan and you progress. And so I think it's really similar in that sense, is in that none of this stuff is really that natural. It's something that you have to practice. I think it's good to practice.
Yeah,
a lot.
I'm picking up at that.
My husband has heard all my speeches so many times. Like before I give a keynote or something, or even a shorter speech, like he will hear my speech so many times.
Interesting.
And I practice it so many times, and so that I remember it. And it gets easier and easier because I've already written the speech, so then I can just pull pieces and then weave in the issues.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you think about Bernie Sanders, he says the same things over and over. So at a certain point, you're just repeating things that the messaging works.
Yeah.
But it is a work in progress and a trial and error to find the messaging that works.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I nerd out on like climate communication and on how to create and craft messaging that creates change.
Yeah.
And sports are such a great way to draw analogies in the outdoors, because like nature and sports, like that pursuit, I think it's something that really unites us as humans.
Yeah, let's actually get into that, because I've seen you have a tagline on your site that says like sports can change the world, and you've kind of explained what you mean by that. And like let's dive more into it, because A, I agree. B, I feel like you'll be able to like eloquently lay out exactly what you're trying to get at there. Yeah.
When it comes to creating change in the world, or, just when we're trying to, whether it's on a grand scale or a lot of it just happens on an individual level, but when we start from a place of joy, it creates a much stronger bond than when we start by yelling at each other. Or
You don't say.
if I tell you everything that's wrong with you and your interview style, like you're not gonna want to hear any
Talking
of
about
my
imperfects.
Yeah. I'm just using that as an example. Like that's a terrible example. I'm sorry.
What a very good one.
But it's like when we start from a place of love and something that almost everyone can relate to, like within each of us is nature. You know, like the outdoors, even though our modern society has been set up in a way to make us feel like we're not part of nature, we are on an inherent level. And so when we get people to remember that, it draws them in, it creates a positive bond. And when we start from that place of joy, it just helps to make those difficult conversations ahead much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Finding a common ground,
Yes.
if you will.
Yes. And the analogies we can use from sport and mountain climbing and stuff like that, they're just inherently, I think there's something about them that is inherent to the human experience.
Okay.
You know, that feeling of like...
Human experience, I like that. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about my journey as like a petite girl from Minnesota who had like very little experience in the mountains that looked up and was like, I want to climb all the peaks in the Wasatch, you know? And people laughed at me and it seemed impossible. And it can seem similarly impossible trying to change like our electrical grid or the systems that provide us energy. And so we can all kind of relate to that feeling of being a child and looking at a peak and thinking it's insurmountable, but then breaking it down into the step by step.
Yeah.
And so I think that just sense of awe and wonder of the mountains, it's just a really powerful analogy.
Yeah.
I use it all the time in my speeches.
Interesting. I mean, that's such a methodical perspective to have on it, right? Like, as opposed to, I'm going to go down the powder covered face and like see what happens. Like, I'm going to turn and it'll feel good, right? And then it's, you know, you saying that's so reflective of the things you have accomplished, right? On like numerous scales, because a lot of things it seems like you've done have required that, like, you know, oh my God, there's this huge objective. Okay, let's like, what's step one?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe step one's probably like waking up early and eating like a good breakfast or something, you know, and then you just like keep chipping away at it from there. And it does. I have a similar process actually that it's super intimidating, you know, when you have this like large objective.
Yeah.
But then when you just kind of like quiet everything down in your mind and you think about like, all right, pretty sure it's possible. What's the first step?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. It's like all those skills of project management and everything come in.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's just like, I've had to really work hard to build like community and coalitions of people that believe in me, because as far as we've come in the world, there's still a lot of gender bias and height bias. And like, it's been hard for me to overcome those voices from society telling me where my place is. Like when I was going to go to Everest with my partner.
Yeah, let's talk about this. I want to get, let's like.
He's like 6'2", and he's just like, you know, he looks like a mountaineer. Masculine. Yeah, he looks like a mountain guide, kind of.
Mountain guy.
Yeah, and so we would tell people that we were going to Everest, and they would ask me if I was just going to base camp. But they would assume he was going to the summit.
Yeah.
And there's just been so many things like that. And it doesn't seem like a big deal at the time, but they really wear on you. And then you're like, is my place just at base camp? And it gets into your head, and then it messes with your internal dialogue.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of extra lifting to silence those voices.
Yeah, totally.
From society, and then you internalize them.
Yeah.
And it becomes like part of you.
Yeah.
And so I think we still have a lot of work to do in that sense, in like what comes to mind when we think about who belongs in the mountains.
Interesting.
And like companies.
Who does belong in the mountains?
Who does belong in the mountains? And what does a mountaineer look like? Like, you think of like a big burly dude with like a big beard.
Yeah,
he's like Swiss,
beard.
you know?
He's Swiss. He's
Swiss.
Like super windburned.
Yeah. He's like, his lips are all chapped and gnarly. But I mean, there's just a lot of disrupting we have to do in terms of our mental pictures, and then also how that translates to like funding and opportunities, because it's like extra hard. I think still there's a lot of disparity in terms of like who's on teams for sponsors and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, that's so crazy. Like, you know, where you grew up and being just like the nerd kid with the doctor parents that like wasn't being pushed to be a world-class athlete, and then you climb Everest, and not only do you climb Everest, but you climb like a badass route on Everest. And like, did that feel like this big achievement to you, or was it kind of just like another tick because there's been so many incremental things?
I mean, it was a really magical and very difficult experience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to put into words, like 40 days on the mountain, and what you go through to acclimatize is really hard. And I don't think that it's like the pinnacle of my career, but I'm really proud of my accomplishment. And, you know, I tore my ACL 7 weeks before.
Yeah.
So I also did it without an ACL.
Yeah,
And
saw
that part made it even more, it was really stressful. It was really hard, but it gave me a lot of confidence and self-belief.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I know I can take those skills into whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, they're good life skills to have.
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes, you know how we were talking about like self-compassion and stuff before, and like overcoming, like there is a part of those kinds of pursuits that I wonder if they're inherently like self-love or self-destructive. You know, because it's really hard on your body. Like, it's not a great place.
Yeah.
Like, you come home and you're just like really thin and like,
emaciated.
You know,
yeah. I mean, it is
it's
like
hard on your body.
Yeah,
it's like a drug.
It is like a masochistic like process oftentimes, or story.
Yes. So
like that.
I don't know that it's good for us. I don't know. It's a very complicated question.
I think it's
I don't
really,
know where I'm
there's
going.
There's a lot
with
of value
that.
like diving into it, because I can relate to what you're saying, because I have so many like objectives that I've set out to do and accomplished, or have failed, and like have put, you put yourself through pain trying certain things. And like when you take a step back, you're like, why am I like willingly suffering so much?
Yeah.
And like my current understanding of it, because again, in like the action sport industry, and I'm sure like plenty of industries, there's kind of this like, there's a lot of avenues you can take, right? Like as a snowboarder, I could be doing much more casual things and still find a role as a professional snowboarder, versus something like Chad's Gap, right? And I kind of like, you spend time unpackaging the why behind that. And I feel like for me, life's all about balance, right? And counterbalance. And there's just sort of like an ever going like pendulum, right, of all things.
Yeah.
And there's the tier of like suffering and like intense like psychological focus that something like that can take. Also, when it happens, pendulums in the other way, it is like super fulfilling, and you get this like heavy sense of confidence or gratitude, self-love or whatever. And like that, for better or worse, is the addicting part for me and how I understand it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'm learning is that two things can be true at the same time. Like, it can be an act of self-harm and an act of self-love at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of more gray area and nuance to things. It's like so often in our culture today, we want to paint people as either like a sinner or a saint.
Black and white.
Yeah,
we
like
we love black and white,
that.
good,
or for
bad,
women,
black, white.
It's like
the
slut or Madonna. It's like the dichotomy is there.
Totally.
And what I was going to say is that going back to my childhood and like struggles with mental health, like I struggled a lot with addiction and with depression and anxiety as a child.
Yeah.
And I find that mountaineering and skiing is a more healthy avenue than what else I would be falling into. And so it could still be harmful for me, but it's probably less harmful than what I would be doing if I didn't have that.
There you go. Yeah.
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 So
That's
it's
a good
like
perspective for sure.
Yeah. So it's like minimizing harm, right? Like we're all just slowly dying.
Minimizing your risk.
Yeah,
exactly.
minimizing your risk.
By climbing Everest.
Yes. And like by pouring, it's maybe like the lesser of the evils that I could be getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I mean, as you said, you can kind of draw parallels from that process into your activist process.
Yes.
And share that story with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I use like the Everest story for my testimony. I testified to the Senate about how climate change is impacting the snow sports and mountain communities. And I talked about Everest. And then when I testified to the House Natural Resources Committee, I talked about my issues and my struggle with mental health and how like pollution and air quality can exacerbate mental health issues.
For sure.
So yeah, I've used those things a lot in my talks. And so, yeah, it's like learning how to take your experiences in the outdoors and then tell those stories to our elected officials. I think that's a really good skill that everyone who's listening should be practicing and showing up to the Utah legislative session.
There you go.
Or to their own like city, state, or federal hearings.
Yeah.
We need a lot more citizen activists to be involved.
What's step one for like people that want to become more involved, maybe activism / politically?
Yeah, I mean, my first recommendation is to get involved with your local environmental nonprofits.
Okay.
Because for me, like they've always sent out emails and I just say yes and show up. So you can find a list of them by going to Patagonia Action Works.
Okay.
It's a website Patagonia created where you put your zip code in and it shows you all the environmental nonprofits in your area. Then you can go to their websites and just sign up for the email list of 3 of them and read the emails.
That's cool.
Read the emails and take action, you know?
Read the emails.
Read the email. Like, you don't have to read every one, but like there's certain times too. Like one thing to understand about policy, which is where I've focused on, is that they'll get things will get momentum and then they'll get to a tipping point. And so strategically, like they'll get to a point where enough people are coming at it from enough avenues, it puts enough pressure on their elected officials to do something. And so being strategic and understanding like the ebbs and flows, you know, and like when it's time, you got to show up and give it your all, get it to the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned Patagonia. How have you been with Patagonia as an athlete for a long time? Because it seems like a very good fit. And that's a large part of their focus is athletes who are involved in activism. And how did that relationship come about?
Yeah, I've been a Patagonia athlete for 12 years.
Cool.
Yeah. And they were always my dream sponsor. I called their team manager every 6 months for 6 years until they decided to bring me on as a snow sports athlete.
Persistent.
Yeah,
Nice.
because like they were just my dream company to work with. And so it's been really cool to see over the last 12 years how doing the right thing for people and the planet can be good for business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And how business can save our home planet.
And they, Patagonia in general is kind of going through some big shifts right now.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, so a few months ago, the Chenards, Yvonne Chenard, decided to basically sell the company to the earth. And so a lot of companies, like when they get to a certain point, they've grown to a certain size, they go public and then they're sold to shareholders. And it's like a big cash out moment for the founders, the owners, the original employees of the company. But I think long term it can be harmful because then the company is beholden to shareholders. And I've seen brands sort of lose their way when that happens. And so what Patagonia did is they put all the profits that they make every year into a trust, and that trust goes to environmental grassroots nonprofits. And they set it up as a 501c4, which means that they can endorse political candidates and give money to political campaigns, which is huge.
Yeah, that's mega.
That's
to be
mega.
Able to take like a stance instead of just having to be like completely hands off.
Yes, because being able to get involved politically and to be able to endorse specific candidates, that's really what brands need to be doing for advocacy in 2023 and going forward.
Yeah.
Like literally democracy and like our way of life as Americans is on the line.
Great, that's heavy.
Yeah, like there's a lot on the line. It's really important. It's to be brave and to like take a stand and to learn about this stuff because just having traveled to a lot of countries that don't have the same kind of government that we do, like there's a lot of problems with the United States and with our governments. However, I do think it's one of the better systems in the world, and we really need more defenders of democracy. Like we need more people who are defending the environment and that are standing up for human rights. But at the bottom line, like there are a lot of attacks on democracy in and of itself right now.
Yeah.
And so we really need people to step up and get involved.
Yeah. You've gone so full circle of like where you started out as a kid, right? With your name even being like, what were the origins of your name you were telling me from your parents? Like had like, you know, like
strong and womanly and famous in battle.
Yeah, there you go. And now you're like found yourself in the realm of politics, which is maybe like having that name as a North Star, for example, is probably been you know, helpful.
I mean,
or even just like that concept, you know.
Yeah.
This is where you've ended up.
I think just having my mom always be like, you're going to be a politician, like you're going to be the first woman president. I wouldn't want that, I don't think, but it pushed me to see myself like capable of big things.
Yeah. I mean, that gives you just this tier of confidence as well to like, again, like climb the mountain.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then
I'm really happy I've been able to integrate it all. And yeah, it does sometimes feel a little chaotic with like all the parts of my life and trying to keep it
on track.
Yeah. It feels messy.
Yeah.
So messy.
I bet. Well, the realm of politics seems like there's so much minutia to sort out, and then let alone like the role of an athlete is also like in complete flux at all times, and then let alone trying to blend the two, create goals, and like find what your like steps are to navigate those two spaces, let alone blend those two spaces, is a big undertaking.
But sometimes it's just like keeping in touch with people and then showing up at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of it sounds complicated, but a lot of it's not. A lot of it's easy. You just show up and you speak up, and like you feel really scared inside, but you try to just push through that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's funny. A friend of mine, we always joke about that, like the first step to an adventure is just showing up.
Yeah.
You just got to show up. That's step one. Oftentimes that's step one.
And you got to be a little prepared, you know.
Maybe do some homework.
Maybe do a little homework. Like make sure you packed well, and like you have some water and maybe a Cliff Bar with you. You know, always have a Cliff Bar.
Yeah, always have a Cliff Bar.
Always have a Cliff Bar, because you never know how long it's gonna go. But a lot of it's just showing up and speaking up, and so it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Saying yes.
Yes. Do you see yourself in politics?
You know, I did a training this spring. It was through this local group called Utah Women Run, where they train women how to run for political candidacy. Mm-hmm. And I've thought about it. TBD.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure I'm not quite sure that's my path.
Yeah.
I love the role of an activist because I can say what I want. Mm. And I still, I'm really working on not listening to the naysayers. That's been my goal in 2023 is like, I've
gotta block out the haters.
I've really been disabling comments on a lot of my Instagram posts, and it's been so good for my mental health. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
do you have a hard time finding balance between, or honestly, how would you recommend finding balance between the all-consuming world of social media and technology with being someone who just at the end of the day likes to spend time outside?
People always told me don't read the comments, and for a long time I didn't believe them, but now I'm at the point where I think don't read the comments.
Wow. Yeah.
You don't need to. I mean, there's so many weird things people say.
I know, it's crazy.
So traumatizing.
Especially on like your tier 2, like with your following, but then also your messaging, right? It's just like, and that's mega props for being in that space too, right? Because it's not easy. You're in like, I post a photo of a method, trick. People like tricks. That's like in my lane, what I'm kind of doing, and like not that controversial.
Yeah.
But then trying to operate in a controversial space, and especially in like a more turbulent time for those topics, climate activism and whatnot. I commend you, because that is not easy.
Yeah, it's just like sometimes when you read things, you can't unread them. Mm-hmm. And so it's like the things that I've read, some of them, as much as you try to like create a barrier, you can't. It's impossible. It will get through.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, not reading the comments, it's been a breath of fresh air this year. I'm so much happier.
All those people too, they're just like, sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
They're just mad.
And
they happen to see you.
Yeah.
And you're fucking killing it. You know, like there is that aspect of it too, right? Like,
I know. I really wish we could do more to like change the algorithms, because I feel like social media inherently is like, it's gone in a bad place. Just in terms of what it's trying to get people, you know, like the way it tries to keep us addicted.
Yeah.
Addicted.
Totally.
They're using the same kind of tricks that the gaming and the gambling industry would use, like the slot machine, you know, the scroll. And
infinite scrolling.
I do think that's another place we need to work on with policy. Like we need the government to step in and do something to regulate the social media companies.
Yeah.
Because it's harming us.
It is.
Not just kids, like everybody's mental health is being harmed from it. And like sometimes I go on a crazy spiral and I'm like, I'm part of the problem, you know? But it's the same kind of storytelling, you know, like if you can always take your following somewhere else, and it's like if you're a good storyteller, that will resonate with people. So,
I mean, it's such a new human experience too, to have followers and all that stuff and social media, you know, like I think I mean, it's got to level out. Like at the end of the day, you got to give humanity some credit. Like I hope we're smart enough that eventually, you know, it can get crazy enough, like social media, for example. But like, I have hope that it will find this equilibrium space and be a little bit more, a little bit less of a Wild West, if you will.
It's good to have that hope. Hold on to that.
I got it. I'm holding on to it for you.
Try to keep that optimism.
You know, I kind of got a curveball last question. We've covered like really cool topics with activism and your incredible accomplishments in your career. And like, you know, it seems like you're on this pretty warrior's journey to help the world. But I was on your site and you have all these accolades listed, and most of them I could kind of pick out and understand. But one of them was you completed something, I take it a race or like a foot-powered summer thing, and it's called the Hematoma Quad Traverse.
Yeah.
What is that? Because that sounds brutal.
Yeah, it's
the guillotine ascent. Yeah.
I didn't name the Hematoma Quad. So it's a ridge traverse that goes from North Thunder Peak, which is like the top of the coal pit and the hypodermic needle. So you go up there, and you go to South Thunder and then Bighorn to Lone.
Cool.
So it's like the little bit of the whirl, it overlaps, but it has this other really cool part along the Lightning Ridge, which is like when you're in Upper Little Cottonwood Canyon, if you're at Snowbird, you're staring at that ridge the whole time. Yeah, totally. And that ridge is so special.
That's cool.
But it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How were your quads?
I was really beat up. Yeah, I got worked. Like, this was before I had like a GPS watch and like before Strava. Like it was like 2013 or something when I did it, and I didn't know that much about training. I was really overtrained. I was really beat up from it. Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah. Have you done the whirl?
I've tried it.
You've tried it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you gonna try it again?
No, I don't think so.
How come?
It's hard on my knees.
You don't say.
It's hard on my body because I love my body. I need to save my knees for the winter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I don't need to beat my knees up all summer. It's a really cool objective. I tried to become the first woman to do it, and I failed. And I love that ridge line, and it's a hugely special place in my heart. But it's hard on my body. Yeah. So I want to save some of the cartilage in my knees.
There you go.
Yeah. I already have like some arthritis and all this stuff going on. So
totally.
Yeah. I mean, there's maybe in the future I would revisit it as a goal. But after I tore my ACL in 2019 and had surgery, and it's like it just takes a long time from that kind of stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had aspirations to do it. There's kind of a phase that I was like into things like that. A number of years ago I did the picnic.
That's awesome.
Which was like a really cool adventure, and I was like, oh, like big moving days in the mountains, cool. Like the world's in my backyard, and then I bounced back and forth. That I don't know. It would just take such like a dedicated amount of time to train for it, and then I also kind of need to be realistic with where my like body skeletal structure is at for work. You know, during the winter time, and yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to commit to it either.
Yeah, I mean, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, my partner, he was like a world champion half Ironman. So he comes from like a competitive racing background. And I came from skiing where you just like ski bell to bell every day. And you don't train, you know, you like drink.
Yeah.
You know,
Rage.
that's what you do.
First chair, last call.
So it was really interesting to me to learn about training. And I did become more obsessed with like the mileage and stuff for a time. But he told me like this analogy with racing and in life. It's like you only have so many matches in your matchbox. And so like how you use them in a race, if you use one too soon, you won't have it later on. And it was really helpful. It's been a really helpful analogy for me for pacing. Whether it's like for running a 50K or whether it's for my season or whether it's thinking about how I'm going to ski until I'm 80 or 100 years old, which is my goal.
Yeah.
Is to ski till I'm like an old lady with gray hair and all wrinkled up, like out there walking slowly up the mountain.
That is a goal I've created or I've had in the last couple of years. I've like one of which, I want to be, I've decided I was like, I want to be a pro snowboarder until I'm in my 40s. And I want to be able to snowboard recreationally until I'm like, in my 80s, my whole life. I want to be able to just to like ride.
Yeah. So I think
the work starts now.
Well, no, it started 10 years ago. No, just kidding. But no, there's so much you can do to like preserve your joints, your body, and to have longevity. And so that's 100% my goal. And so right now, that's not like high on my priority list. Not to say it won't be in the future, but
it's May. You're coming down from the season.
Yeah, I feel like I still have a lot of spring ski mountaineering left.
There you go.
I mean, the snowpack is so deep up high.
It is. Yeah.
We could ski for like another month or two. So I'm still looking forward to a couple of big days in the Alpine on skis. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. This has been great. Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome.
This was like so awesome to like kind of catch up with you. I'm familiar with your story, but it was like really insightful to kind of hear your story and get to like pick your brains about just the body of work you have is really impressive. So thank you. And would you like to share any thank yous?
Thanks for having me. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Backcountry for having me as an athlete and for the support over the years, because it's been really cool to have their headquarters like 10 minutes from my house in Park City. And I go to the retail store all the time. And so I'm just super grateful for the support of Backcountry.
That's awesome. Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. And in the meantime, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. From the crew at Backcountry, we'll see you out there.